Welcome to Talent Matters, the podcast where talent, skills, and grit take centre stage. This podcast is brought to you by Sanderson, a leader in global talent solutions. This is episode 5, and I am delighted to be joined by Keith Barry, brain hacker. Welcome, Keith.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to see you.
It's good to see you. So we were just talking there before we started about life in general, and this podcast, we always like to start with talent and the early kind of interests that you have. What kind of kid were you? What were you into?
So I suppose with my background, the first real shift in my life came when I was 5 or 6, which is when I got my first ever magic set. And that was a Paul Daniels magic set. So anybody over the age of 40 might know who Paul Daniels is. But anybody,
Paul and Debbie McGee.
Yeah, I mean, anybody under the age of 40 probably has no idea what I'm talking about. But yeah, I got a Paul Daniels magic set when I was 5 or 6. And that kind of got my interest going in magic. But, you know, to get back to your question, what kind of kid was I was pretty normal growing up, except for the fact that I would badger people to try and show them some magic every once in a while. And I had a very happy childhood for the most part. We lived on a real country road, I suppose. So
You're from Waterford.
Yeah, but the country in Waterford, so as it was then, it's not the country anymore, but Williamstown, which is back Dunmore East Road. So my, I suppose, daytime activities after school were, straight outside every day on the BMX bicycle, just run around the fields with the lads and all the rest of it. And then in my teenage years, I got transferred into Mount Sion Secondary School, which I didn't really like that much. Like, pretty harsh inner city school in Waterford, and got quite badly bullied in there. So it affected me, but I was quite resilient. So after school, I kind of let it go, and I still had a great time after school. But school days were quite difficult. And then when I was 17, I got as far away from Waterford as I could get. So I picked Galway to go to in college. So, but overall, as a family life, like, I'm still very close to my parents and my sister, and we had a very stable family life and a great, happy childhood. And then obviously the whole way through that, I was, doing magic and kind of like researching magic,
I was only thinking about this earlier on because I think we all have something that piques our interest when we're young, that we get obsessed about it, that we get really, really into. And then you wonder about people that are growing up today with social media and their phones are distracting them all the time. And you don't see, I think, as many kids that find their niche early and get really into it and obsess about it and become great at it. Do you think you'd be very different if you were growing up the way kids today are growing up?
Potentially. Depends on parenting. I always blame the parents. People don't like to hear that. I always say, so when very often people come to me with, issues that perhaps their children have, but I always just, I don't even look at the kid for a moment to talk to the parents and find out about them. And what I mean by that is, there's a battle going on right now, and the battle is, the age of digital distraction that we're in. We need digitization. We need to be malleable, but we need to be mindful of what it's doing to our mindset. And I think people know that, but they're not acknowledging that.
Yeah, well, it's lazy, isn't it? It's easy parenting to put your kid in front of an iPad.
Well, this is it. It's two separate things. So, for example, I believe in the world I'm in now, I would still have found my way because my parents would have encouraged me to explore a lot of different areas and find my passion. So, to give a real concrete example, I suppose, my own kids, right? So I always say, program your kids or your kids will be programmed for you, right? And what I mean by that is they're not robotic, but my kids have been programmed to be more positive than negative. They've been programmed to be more productive than non-productive. That's what I mean by mental programming, not that they're robotic human beings. They've got their own personalities, and we have arguments, and I have challenges as a parent, but they've already found their passions. Here's my point. So my son Braden, he's 12, he plays rugby and he does karate, and he loves both of them equally. Now, if you were to ask me if I'm a pushy parent, if I was a real pushy parent, I would have kind of pushed them hard into magic, right? I encourage them to do magic. I have the magical house, right? I have every magic trick possibly known to man. And I surrounded them with that, but they just weren't interested. So I didn't push that upon them, but I made sure that they explored as much stuff in life as early as humanly possible to find their passions. And right now, and for a considerable number of years, his has been rugby and, karate, and then, yes, the Xbox, right? I'm not going to lie. And then with my daughter, she's predominantly, nearly wholeheartedly all the way into karate. Now, she's good at art and other things as well, but, she's the European Kempo karate champion, for example. And that's not because we pushed her into that. She found that and found her tribe. She loves it, like loves it with a passion. And I think that's important. I think to allow kids and encourage kids to explore as many different areas as possible. And honestly, when it comes to the over digitization of the world, especially with kids, I think it's important. Distraction is key. You can't get them off technology. You can't stop them. You can try. I think you'll lose that battle. But distraction is key. So I distract my kids as much as humanly possible. And, I think right now, there is an overwhelming avalanche of kids who are suffering with their mental health. And, we talk about mental health a lot, but I actually don't hear people, really talking hard about what's happening with teenagers right now. Like I've met, I don't know how many teenagers with eating difficulties. I've met, I don't know how many teenagers dealing with social anxiety. And I do believe it's twofold. It's parenting and then it's also social media. And they're the issues right there. And if people choose to ignore those issues and say, I'm not so sure it's social media. I've been doing my best as a parent. I would, for the most part, disagree, Anyway, I don't know where we started with that, but I go off on tangents and rants. So there you go. So feel free to interrupt me.
Tangents are good. Well, I'll tell you, one of the things I thought about when we were thinking about this podcast is that your TED Talk has had over 10 million views on YouTube.
Well, actually, over 19 million.
Is it 19 million?
Well, 19 million on the TED website, and then probably another 10 million on YouTube itself.
Yeah, so I just looked at YouTube and I was like, geez, 10 million views there. So some people know you as an entertainer, some people know you as an author, some people know you from your TED Talk.
Yeah.
But you're actually a scientist. You went to UCG, was it?
Yeah, UCG. It's now NUIG, of course. But yeah, ultimately, when I was 17, I went up to Galway, and it was interesting. I can never remember his first name, but Mr. Barry, I used to know him as he was our career guidance counsellor, and he's probably listening to this now. And ultimately, he said, he gave us one of those aptitude tests. I am the prime example of how you should never listen to an aptitude test, because he said to me, listen, here's what you're strong at. You're strong at maths and you're strong at English and so on. But whatever you do, if you go to college, just don't do science because it's not strong for you. But in my head, I always knew I was going to be a magician or a mentalist or a hypnotist. So, I only went to college because my parents were like, that's great as a hobby, but you're going to college. So I thought, just to kind of prove everybody wrong, what'll I choose? I didn't really want to do anything. So I thought, I'll just do science, just to kind of put it up against him. And then went to Galway. And when I graduated in 98, I actually graduated with the highest marks that anybody had gotten in Galway University at that time. I actually had a paper published as an undergraduate on kinetic chemistry. So ultimately,
So what was the degree?
So
was it general science?
Yeah, it was
degree?
BSc, but at the end of it, I was really zoned in on chemistry.
Right.
So, I was signed up for a PhD, and Professor Spillane nearly tore his hair out when I walked into him one day, and I just said, "Listen, I'm not coming back for the PhD," and he was like, "Why not?" Because I was kind of his golden child because I'd done so well. And I said, I'm just not really interested in chemistry, even though I've done well in it, and I'm not really interested in science. I'm going to be a magician. And he just looked at me sideways. And he's like, you're crazy. I was like, yeah, I know. And
it does sound pretty random when you say to somebody, I'm going to be a magician.
Yeah, I know.
It?
Yeah, oh, completely. Yeah, I get it completely. It's the same with comedy, go get a real job. Yeah. And but I did need a real job. So that's when I moved down to Dublin, to Sandyford. And I got a job with Oriflame, which is a Swedish cosmetics company. So I'm a cosmetic scientist by trade. So I used to invent makeup, basically.
Wow. And then how did the passion and the hobby of magic transition into something that could be more than like a part-time gig or more than...
Yeah, so I always, in my head, I don't think I heard it anywhere. In my head, I always thought, always ensure that when you decide to go full-time, the reason for doing that is that your hobby has kind of monetized, money-wise, has outweighed your career. So I thought to myself, just be as busy as possible. And at that time, I was doing everything, right? I was doing, you name it, kids' parties. I was doing weddings. I was here in Dublin, so I was doing like the Kitchen nightclub at the time on Friday nights.
I remember the Kitchen nightclub. The stroll around magic stuff.
Yeah, so that was me.
Vaguely.
Yeah, so that was
me, right? A lot of people
right?
who went to the Kitchen don't remember much, but...
yeah. They might remember the fellow who did the magic trick where the card stuck on the ceiling. Well, that was me, right?
Wow.
And
that's a long time ago now.
Yeah, and then the likes of Bill Cullen, he was very good to me and he hired me for some corporate events, and then I ping-ponged. And eventually at one stage anyway, I realized that I was making enough money from my hobby to let the day job go. And that's what I did, right? So I just decided, it was 23, so that's 24 years ago now, give or take. And ultimately, I just wrote up my notice. And again, I was doing really good in Oriflame. I was working up to be process chemist, which means that, like, for example, even at 23, I was being flown over to Poland on my own to look after full-scale production sometimes. So I was doing quite well in there, and I just handed in my notice one day and said, "Look, I'm going for this full time." And in my mind, I knew I was making enough money to do that, and that's what I did. So jumped into a full time, and then just grafted from there.
So milestone one is almost, is there enough income to sustain?
Yeah.
What were the other milestones? Because when you look at some of the highlights, there is, having the TV show going international into different countries, etc. So what were the kind of milestones that made you stop and think along the way that you were reaching different levels?
Well, I suppose the big one would have been 2003, where a production company not far from here, actually, Midas Productions, I hooked up with them, and we just filmed me doing magic around the streets of Dublin, and we brought that into RTE, and ultimately, a few months later, Close Encounters with Keith Barry was born, and that went out prime time. So that was like 6:30 Sunday evenings on RTE, and that did really well. Like, that popped. And
that went international then, didn't it?
Yeah, actually, that sold really well for RTE at the time. So that sold into 33 countries or something for them. And ultimately, I did that. So that was the first real milestone here, where I was gaining some recognition and people started to know who I was. Still didn't tour in the live circuit off the back of that. I waited till after season 2 of that. So in 2004, I did another season of Close Encounters. And ultimately then I toured off the back of that. And then I just started doing specials with RTE, because I realized it's not sustainable to put out that volume of content every year, given the budgets that we have here in Ireland. So yeah, and then 2006, I'd been going to the States from 2004 out to LA, and spending just all of my own money and getting into debt by being in LA, and just trying to break LA. So for me, breaking LA was going to nightclubs every single night, not drinking, going in there, doing magic, bypassing queues. Like, I laugh. I was listening yesterday to a radio show, but there's, some kid out there who's like kind of gay crashing the BAFTAs and the Oscars and all that. I mean, that's what I was doing in LA all those years ago. I was just gay crashing everything, but I got known. So I was doing, I would gay crash into a nightclub, and I'd be doing magic for, it could be anybody, Justin Timberlake or Nicole Scherzinger, all these different celebrities. And ultimately, there was one night, after 2 years of doing this and getting nowhere, so I was out there just getting into debt. But after 2 years of doing that, I was doing magic for Paul Rosenberg, Eminem, who was Eminem's manager, Eve, who's a rap artist, one of the Osbournes, Kelly Osbourne, and Paris Hilton. So I was doing magic for them, and they were screaming, kind of running around the nightclub at the reactions to what I was doing. And then ultimately there was an MTV executive in the corner of the room, and she came over and said, "Do you want your own MTV show?" And I said, "Yes," straight away. And this is in the middle of a nightclub, probably, 1 a.m. at night. And she said, "Okay." And my manager at the time, he was there, and he went over, and right there and then they did a handshake deal. And the next week I was down in Cancun in Mexico for my MTV special, which was Keith Barry Brainwashed. And then over the years, then I did more and more television out there as well. So the real milestones would have been, 2003, 2006 was my CBS special, Keith Barry Extraordinary. So that's huge, because that's the biggest network in America. And then after that, I suppose the next big milestone would have been headlining in Planet Hollywood in Las Vegas.
Wow. And then I suppose there's some other milestones in terms of some of the people that you interacted with. I remember that. What was the blindfold? The blindfold drive.
I originally did it here, actually. I did that, I think it was the first season of Close Encounters with Keith Barry. I basically hijacked Catherine Thomas, and I drove a car blindfolded, like at speed, around the Wicklow Mountains with her screaming her head off, because she'd no idea what was going to happen. And then in 2006, for my CBS show in the States, which I suppose just got a lot more traction, I did it again with Nicole Scherzinger from the Pussycat Dolls. And the Pussycat Dolls were huge at the time. I also did it with the rap star Eve, and she's huge out in the States as well. But ultimately, they were the ones that really kind of popped from the drive perspective. And, those ones are still up on YouTube, up on my YouTube channel. You can look at them there.
And that's very much the entertainment side of things. But then there's I suppose, the deeper side around mindset and performance.
Yeah.
And I know you've worked with high performance athletes, you've worked on leadership. So maybe tell us a little bit about your kind of philosophy on mindset.
Well, I think, so it's interesting, right? I've got this brand that ultimately now, to encompass everything that I do, is Brain Hacker, because 50% of what I do is hacking brains purely for fun. I make no excuses for that. Sometimes people get confused by my brand because they're so familiar with me off the television, right? But they may not know that 50% of my work for a considerable number of years has been, as a brain hacker, helping people alter their mindset. So, just so people understand, when I was 14 is when I started with my journey, if you like, into hypnotism. So I started learning hypnosis when I was 14. And then when my girlfriend at the time was my wife, now married, when we were in college, she was in Galway also, she was studying psychology. So I started to read all of her psychology books. So then I started to learn about neurolinguistic programming. And then I started to learn, everything from Freudian techniques all the way through to, as I said, like things like neurolinguistic programming, but also cognitive behavioral therapy and things like that. And I qualified then as a hypnotist. So that's when I started, right all the way back then when I was kind of 23, 24. It was really when I started to help people with their mindset quietly in the background, didn't really make much noise about it. And then I suppose it was well before COVID, probably in my late 30s, that I started to do a lot of keynotes. And those keynotes were based upon really how to hack your subconscious mind for whatever it is that you want to achieve. And I'm still fascinated by the amount of people listening to this and the amount of people out there are aware of their subconscious mind, but that's it. They've no awareness of how it's structured. They don't no awareness of how it works, and they've certainly no awareness of how to hack their subconscious mind. So that's what I've been doing predominantly in that space for the past 10 years. Like A, it started with keynotes, then B, a lot of one-to-one work. I did some seminars then, and I still do some seminars. Again, a lot of this work, I'm in a kind of privileged position, if you like, that I don't have to advertise that much. So that's why people don't hear about it perhaps sometimes, unless you're following me on LinkedIn, which is where, and I'm really only, I suppose that's the space that people started to find out a lot about this work, because I've really only pushed LinkedIn since COVID. I was never really there before, because it's not a space that you would find, I suppose, somebody in the public eye like me, right? So when people see it's me, half the people don't even believe it's me. They think it's like that I've hired somebody to set up an account. I'm on LinkedIn nearly every day, and that's where I post this type of content. And still now, I work a lot with athletes, one-to-one on, peak performance, how to get into a flow state. And then I also work with a lot of organizations on leadership strategies and leadership skills. And, I know a lot of people might think, what does Keith Barry know about leadership? Well, look, first of all, leadership is a state of mind. But secondary, if you think of it like this, I just did, the Bord Gáis, right? So the Bord Gáis, my own core team, is about 20 people. So I'm leading that team of 20 people. And that's not new. Like, for 20 years I've toured or longer. And I always have a team of people with me. So I've got to lead them. And then also, in somewhere like the Bord Gáis, you've got an extended team then that goes up to about 50 people. And I've got to lead those people. So not only do I speak about leading, I practice what I preach, I suppose is what I'm saying. I come from a certain place with that, and I have a different take on it than a lot of people do as well,
Yeah, and I think that's where we first came across each other, was working on some of those conferences over the years. And I think what you do really well is the combination of entertainment with actual substantive stuff that people can take away from it. Because when somebody goes to a conference, they want to take something away, but they want to enjoy it. They want to feel energized. And I think that's something that you balance really well. Where I want to go next is probably around goal setting, because, and you touched on the pandemic there. And I remember, obviously, for somebody that's in your business where you're an entrepreneur, you've got to eat what you kill, as so to speak. And then the world shut down in the pandemic. I remember you talked about goal setting and how you had to reinvent yourself in the digital world and take some really massive steps and massive action, as you called it at the time. Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about when that pandemic hit. What changes did you have to make?
Yeah, like I think since I was very young, right, I have this mindset of nobody owes me anything. So when the pandemic hit and when I saw just the amount of people that were whinging about the government and whinging about the banks and whinging about the war and whinging about this and moaning and having a gripe about this. And there was all this noise going on. And then you had this other cohort of people who seemingly could just afford to kind of take a holiday. And they were, baking banana bread and making videos about that and saying, oh, isn't this great? I'm getting to spend much more time with my family and I'm realigning my values now. And I was sitting there thinking, well, none of this is relevant to me. And what I mean by that is, I truly believe, like, the sun goes up, goes down. We all sit in the toilet the same way in the mornings. We all brush our teeth the same way in the mornings, right? So in my head, I was looking at these so-called influencers who were putting out this content, and I realize, and I know some of these people, right? And I know behind the scenes, it's a disaster zone, right? Like, they're not happy, and taking that time off didn't make them happy. And I always have, like, in my mind, it's aligned in my head all the time because I've done work on this on myself. What I don't want. So I'll start with this. I always say, define what you don't want to be before you know where you're going. So very often people goal set. Back to what you're talking about. So set goals, great. But actually, before you set goals, define who you don't want to be. And I've said that to a lot of people, and I've yet to find somebody who said to me, "Wow, I've done that." I haven't found anybody who's done it before until I get them to do it. And then it's a really interesting strategy. So for me, who I don't want to be is 2 words. Sorry, I suppose 3 words. An absent father. I know too many people who, do the 5 a.m. grind, then they grind it out till the end of the day. They see their family for 20 minutes and then that's it. And they have no true deep relationship with their family or with their kids. So I don't want to be an absent father. And we were speaking off air, I'm on and off planes a lot at the moment, but I'm very mindful of, I turned to my wife the other day, don't take any more work. I don't want any more work. I have enough work coming in. Let's put family time in. Let's put holiday time in. So for me, when the pandemic hit, when everybody else is bouncing up and down on their mini trampolines and watching Joe Wicks, like, I got to work, right? I didn't need more time with the family because I always have that in check. So for me, it was going back to my formula. I have a very simple formula. I follow it all the time, which is SW plus MA times SATT equals GS. Go back to the formula every time something happens. And it's a simple formula. I could talk to you about the parasympathetic, the sympathetic nervous system, the limbic system. Like, none of it's going to relate, I suppose, to people out there or to you or I. But what does relate is a simple formula. So the SW is your subconscious Y. Add in plus massive action. So what does massive action entail? Multiplied times your subconscious attitude equals guaranteed success. Simple as that. So that's kind of the formula, right? And ultimately, once I go back to the formula every time, I always get that success that I desire. So, for me, in the pandemic, to get back to it, I decided, okay, I'm going to flip virtual early. I'm going to go pivot fast. So within a couple of weeks, when everybody was still trying to figure this thing out, I invested a lot of money into my cabin in my back garden, which just happened to be there by chance. It had just been built. It was just supposed to be a space to kind of write in and be creative in. So I invested, it's about 10,000 euros into that space. I wasn't relying on the government. I wasn't waiting for a grant or anything. I just put the money in. Called Joe Clear. It was a great friend of mine. He's worked for me for 20 plus years. Joe, figure out this thing called Zoom, spec up the cabin, let's go. And then I got to work. So yeah, I paid a guy. I'm laughing about it now because I'm telling this story for the first time. So I went to Fiverr.com. It's a great resource place. Have you ever been on to Fiverr? Yeah. So Fiverr.com, and I paid some guy, I don't know, like, it wasn't a Fiverr, it was like 50 quid to just give me a list of the top, I think it was, top 1,000 companies in Ireland. So I just needed that. So he gave me the top 1,000 companies in Ireland. And then I got 5 email addresses per company, made sure it was GDPR compliant and all the rest of it. And then ultimately, we sent out, me and my wife, we split it between us. We personally, not through, I have automated systems. So I've got Active Campaign. I didn't use Active Campaign. One by one, we sent out 5,000 emails to tell people that I'd pivoted and I was doing work in the virtual space, both keynotes and entertainment. And nothing happened. And I thought, well, that was the greatest waste of time and energy and money possible. I was like, well, that's just terrible, wasn't it? And then I got one gig towards the end of that summer. Out of nowhere, I got a gig and kind of hacked my way through that. And then the avalanche happened. I just got every gig going. So like, and not just
And
Ireland.
they
So,
were brilliant because I remember we did our talent con that year
Yeah.
with Geraldine King and Geraldine and myself and Alison Common. We did, I think it was a 6 hour live stream from Croke
Yeah.
Park, and you seamlessly patched in, and it was fantastic.
yeah, and you know, it was just great to be able to work through that period of time. Like at the end of it, I think myself and Joe were the two people that could actually genuinely say we had cabin fever by the end of it, because we'd been locked in the cabin for a couple of years. But look, it was great for business. And for me, that's just the kind of mind that I have. Like, I suppose, you know, you know, years ago, like when I was starting out, right, I lived in a tiny flat in Northumberland Row, and it was like it was terrible. It was the size of this little area that we're in here, and you know, and I could have whinged and moaned that the bank weren't giving me money for a mortgage. I'm just not built like that. I don't really know why, except I do a lot of work on my own mental programming, and so yeah, I didn't give a smidgen of thought into, you know, I need somebody else's help. I just pivoted, went online, and went for it. And then if that failed, I think I just would have figured out another way. Do you know what I mean? And then, yeah, so that kept us busy the whole way through kind of that COVID period. And we still do virtual shows now. Like I did one last week.
Still go back to the cabin?
Yeah, rarely. It's kind of a novelty now.
I haven't. I spent a lot of the pandemic sitting in a very small office up in the attic, and I did the same thing. We put in some lighting, some cameras, and a boom mic. And I can't go into that room anymore.
Really?
It's full of dust. Yeah, I'm very happy to be back in the real world.
Oh yeah, so am I. I mean, it's busy now. So like, as I mentioned earlier, like I'm on and off flights pretty much every week now, and I do enjoy like the excitement and the adventure of just being out and about, meeting new people and seeing new places and traveling again. You know.
Yeah, I loved what you said earlier about not being an absent father, and I would completely agree with that, because I've 3 kids and then 3 stepkids, so we're very family focused.
Yeah.
Kind of brings me to, obviously there's an intensity about your personality in terms of you're very driven, you're entrepreneurial, you're ambitious. When it comes to unwinding and relaxing, how do you switch off?
Oh, I'm brilliant at that.
Are you?
yeah. So I just came from Southside Angling, where I bought myself a brand new pair of waders. So I'm preparing now for the salmon season ahead, but not just the salmon season. Like, I am into any kind of fishing, anytime, anywhere. So fishing is my unwind, if you like. So, you know, I chose fishing over golf. I just don't have time for both. So for me,
and do you go alone? Do you go with a friend?
So both. So I'm very happy to go on my own, and very happy sometimes to meet up, generally just with one fishing mate. And you could find me in a river, you know, for example, down the Blackwater, but you could equally find me down on the back strand of Tremor Beach fishing for bass or sea trout. You know, so I fish if I can all year round. I haven't actually fished in a couple of months now. More to do with the weather and the fact that the dolphins and porpoises ran up the shore this year, so the cod didn't run up the shore.
Did not expect the podcast to go into
I know.
the dolphins.
There you go.
Porpoises.
Oh, listen, I could talk to you forever about fishing. So yeah, so fishing is my passion, and then actually recently. So there's a couple of things that I do. So fishing is one. Gardening, I'm crazy about gardening, like crazy about it. But I'm a bit of a Neanderthal for some reason. Like with fishing, you know, there's a lot of catch and release, rightly so. But I normally go places where legally I'm allowed to catch and keep the fish and go cook it. Same thing with gardening. I'm not into really planting flower bulbs. It's more spuds and broccoli, peas, you name it. And I've got a small back garden, but I just have loads of containers and I just grow whatever I can, and I try and beat the butterflies and beat the slugs every year because I want to eat organic. Barbecuing is my third thing. So it'd be like literally fishing, gardening, barbecuing. They're the 3 things. Like I barbecue the turkey every year at Christmas, and I barbecue, even now I'll probably barbecue the whole way through winter. I'll barbecue probably 4 times a week.
Very good.
So they're the ways I unwind. And then reading. I'm a voracious reader. I think too many people are just listening to podcasts these days, you know, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. I mean, we're on a podcast now, right? But I just mean in general, people don't read enough. So I literally have a gigantic library. My wife gives out to me because there'll be 30 books will come in the door at one time. She's like, you can't read all of those. I keep explaining to her, it's not about reading them all. It's about having a library of unread books that I can just put my hand up and go, I'm going to read that one today. Or for research, I'll use them. So I'll read on.
And you like the physical book rather than the Kindle?
Yeah, I don't use the Kindle at all.
Do you not?
No. I also, like, I'm big into sleep at the moment. And I've educated my...
Can you sleep? Do you sleep well?
Yeah. I mean, off and on. Depends on certain periods of time because I'm traveling so much. So I
just feel at our age, because we're a similar vintage, I used to sleep great. I remember I slept so well that the house was broken into years ago. They came in, took a few things, took the car, and I slept through it. And it was a small house. It was my first house. Whereas since having kids and since kind of being in the 40s now, I'm a very light sleeper and I'm kind of 5 hours a night. So do you get 8 hours, 7?
I aim to get 7. So 7 is the optimal level. And then ultimately I fall asleep real quick every night. Doesn't even matter if I'm tired or not. I'll get into bed and fall asleep real quick. And very often though I will wake up, and that's the issue for a lot of people. So I mean, I've done a lot of...
Pick up a device when you wake up?
I've done a lot of research in this area for a very specific reason that I can't talk about right now, but I'll let you know down the line when I can talk about it. But ultimately, with sleep, so I know a lot about the space. A lot of sleep experts will tell you, maybe get up and have a walk around. I fully, wholeheartedly disagree. So for me, if you need to go to the bathroom, that's fine, right? But like low level light, try not to turn on the main light in the bathroom. Try to keep the light as low as possible, and then just immediately get back into bed. And if those whirring negative thoughts or busy thoughts or whatever it is that come into your mind, I mean, really, that's what keeps us awake. I have any amount of kind of mental hacks to get around that. So one being just a relaxation visualization that I do, and that will get me back to sleep. But I don't bother with a Whoop device. I don't bother. I have an Apple Watch. I don't wear it going to bed. I think it's just bad to be measuring that all of the time. I think it's good to measure for a short period of time so you know what to do. But once you know what to do, then get rid of the Whoop or get rid of the Apple Watch, because I think you can overanalyze and overmeasure. You know yourself if you've gotten optimum levels of sleep, and you know that if you're wearing those devices, the half-life of coffee is somewhere between 6 and 9 hours depending on our metabolism. So ultimately, if you want to measure that, measure it. But ultimately, don't eat 3 hours before bedtime. Don't have coffee within 7 or 8 hours before bedtime. Get off your devices an hour before bedtime. But nobody wants to hear this. Everybody wants the easy fix, right? So that's why I don't use a Kindle. I would say to people who use a Kindle, if you can, just get some kind of blue light blocker. I've got these glasses that are apparently blue light blockers. The science is kind of out on all of this, just so we're clear. So I've read the science on this. Half the scientists say blue light blockers work, half the scientists don't. So they are disagreeing on that. I always say you want to kick in your circadian rhythm as best as you can. So therefore, when we're going tonight, when the sun goes down, you want the light in your bedroom to go down. So if you're on a Kindle, even put on a pair of light sunglasses to look through. So you're just bringing down that level of light into your eyes. So it doesn't even matter if it's blue light blockers. I just think it's smart to bring down the level of light into your eyes. And I do think reading just an old-fashioned book helps tire out your eyes and your mind quicker than a Kindle would,
The other thing that some people are jumping on the bandwagon with that I've seen on your social media is the ice baths.
Oh, yeah.
Talk to us about what you get from that, or what you feel the value is.
So it's interesting. I'll be very open here about the ice baths, right? The reason I started to put out ice baths is I just did one. I don't know how long ago it was now. I filmed one and put it out. And then I looked at the view insights, and I was like, wow, these are breaking that just broke the algorithm.
Wow.
Like I got whatever it was, 37,000 plays on Instagram and yada yada. But here's the but. The reason that is because right now it's a fad. So I'm a fan of Wim Hof. I really like his techniques. I use his techniques. So he's kind of gotten a bit of noise around him at the moment. So therefore, people are jumping onto the bandwagon of ice baths. They're filming themselves in ice baths. That's feeding the algorithm. That'll be gone in about 6 months, I think, right? They'll jump onto some other fad or some other trend. And most of those people actually will never do ice baths again. I also believe that. I've been using cold therapy for about 7 or 8 years now. So it's not new to me. As a matter of fact, a lot of the kind of experts in Ireland have come to me for advice on, how to set up ice baths, because they know I know. And ultimately, back to your question, the reason I've been doing cold therapy is because 7 years ago, I did discover Wim Hof. So he was the first kind of inroad in there, if you like. And then I looked at the science behind it. So by doing an ice bath, you're 100% reducing your cortisol levels right there and then. Your stress hormone is coming down. Also, it sets your body alkaline against disease, scientifically proven, and then reduces inflammation in your joints. And then finally, it's just a battle for the mind. So it's brilliant for resilience. So there's any amount of reasons that I do it. And, I've been doing it, as I said, for 7 years.
Does it get easier? Because I said the one I saw where you had massive chunks of ice floating in, and I was like, does it get easier, or do you get accustomed to it, or is it the same challenge
differs.
every
It depends
day?
what mood you're in. It depends how much sleep you get. But in an overall context, it definitely gets more controllable. So what I mean by that is the first couple of times most people get an ice bath, they can't breathe. Like the breath just goes and the panic just kicks in and so on. Like I can comfortably sit in an ice bath for an extended period of time if I wish to. I don't believe that's good for you, by the way, for an extended period of time. That's why you have to be careful now, because with what's going on online, there's people challenging each other. I was in it for 10 minutes. Oh, I was in it for 15 minutes. I was in it for 20 minutes. You don't need that. The optimum level to be in an ice bath is 2 minutes. And do you know the amount of people listening to this right now who go, I could never do that. I could never get an ice bath. Because that's what the initial reaction that people have to me when I say about an ice bath. Whoa, not for me. And I say to those people, well, do you want easy? If you want easy, okay, make sure your cholesterol is nice and high then. If you want easy, make sure you're a good few pounds overweight. But you know where that's leading you. I never choose easy. I always choose the hard way. And it's fantastic for your mindset and for stepping outside of your comfort zone. And I enjoy it. Is it easy? No. I mean, do I actually enjoy it when I'm in there? Sometimes I do. Sometimes I hate it. And I make myself do it anyway. I don't negotiate with myself because I know it's good for me. So I was in there yesterday. The day before I was in the sea. The sea now is, I tell you now, it's after getting, I've been in the sea consistently over the winter. It's, to me, it feels like it's at the coldest right now. Now, it could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe that's just in my head. But I was in the sea just 2 days ago. It was freezing, like really cold. But I enjoy that. I feel fantastic afterwards. There is a lot to be said for contrast therapy. I think that's going to be the next step. Wim Hof, that is, he is pushing the cold therapy a lot because I think that's really his USP. But if you go over to Stroh, which is an hour north of Amsterdam, to one of his seminars, like immediately after you do the ice bath, you're in his sauna. So he uses a sauna a lot himself, right? Contrast therapy, the science is pretty solid that's amazing for you as well. And really, it's like a full cardiovascular workout. Like, because think about it, your vessels and your ventricles and, your arteries, your veins, they're all constricting when you're in the ice bath. Now, if you go into a sauna, they expand out, go back into the ice bath, they constrict down. So that's pushing the blood through at a certain rate through your body, which is clearing plaque, it's clearing cholesterol, it's doing all kinds of metabolic things that you can't do with just exercise. So the next stage for me even is I'm probably going to get a sauna in the back garden as well as the ice bath,
Very good. I'm toying with the idea. I haven't quite got there yet. I can handle the sea swims in the summer, which is still pretty cold. But
yeah, I mean, the water temperature here goes up to, I guess, I don't know, it's definitely double digits anyway, probably 13, 14 degrees, the sea temperature here. I don't know, it's probably 6 degrees or something like that at the moment. I get my ice bath down to 1 degree. Anybody out there is kind of interested in this, though. I mean, it's quite simple. You just have your hot shower today or tomorrow, whenever it is, and then at the very end, turn it on now as cold as possible, not halfway, right? It has to be as cold as humanly possible, and wait till it gets cold, and then just in your head go 1,000, 2, 1,000, and get to 10. Just 10 seconds. Then the next day add on an extra 5 seconds, count to 15, then count to 20. And 2 minutes is the optimum level for health. You don't need to go longer than 2 minutes. You get the benefits at 2 minutes. So once you get to 2 minutes, that's what you want to do consistently every day is 2 minutes.
Very good. So in terms of wrapping this up, I think people have got a really good feel for some of the different aspects of your career, from the TV to author to keynote speaker. People that want to get in touch, where can they follow you on social media or connect on LinkedIn? What are the best ways for people?
So I suppose people listening to this is probably LinkedIn. So it's just Keith Barry on LinkedIn. Again, 95% of the time, it's actually me on LinkedIn. The other 5% of the time, it's, one of my team. But like, generally speaking, if somebody really wants to have a meeting with me about an event or something like that, LinkedIn is the best place. And then all of the other usual places I'm on there as well. So, with Instagram, that's where I put out the ice bath work. A lot of Brain Hacking for Fun goes out there, then Facebook as well. And again, you know, a lot of people ignore Facebook, even businesses. I say most of my ticket sales for my public events come through Facebook. So
Really?
if you're listening to this, don't ignore Facebook. Facebook is still a very valuable tool. So yeah, I'm on all the platforms, just Keith Barry. I managed to get Keith Barry, I think, on all of them, as opposed to Keith Barry Official or at Keith P. Barry at one stage on one of them. Like, so
Yeah, and you got the website is Keith Barry?
Yeah, keithbarry.com is the best place to get in direct touch, because I have eyeballs on the emails that come through there every day. So yeah, keithbarry.com. A lot of information up on the website as well, because the website is a brand new website. I just got it reskinned recently. So yeah.
And you're back for TalentCon this year with the Employment and Recruitment Federation, who are very good friends of the show.
Yes, I'm really excited, and lots of new material for that.
We're looking forward to
that as well. And then just when you say, like, because we never really went there, but real quick, like, just with giant goals.
Yeah.
Like, I've just set myself another giant goal. I'm probably going to get into trouble for saying this now, but I'm doing 7 more live events this year in Ireland, like public events, just for fun. And then I'm not doing any next year, because in 2026 I'm going to do the 3 Arena. So I've set that as my big goal for 2026.
Fantastic. Well,
Dare I say it?
We will be there, and
Don't tell anyone. I'll get into trouble.
We'll be there, and we'll make sure that we share it and get it out there as well. That's fantastic. I want to say thank you so much for coming in and doing this. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you at TalentCon. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please follow us on YouTube. So it's at talentmatters_podcast. You can find us same address on Instagram at talentmatters_podcast. On TikTok, thanks to my daughter Callie, we are at talentmatters_pod. And make sure you keep in touch. Thanks, Keith, and we'll see you next time.